Anzelone is an urban ecologist whose work centers on people's daily connections with nearby nature and the role that design, education, and government can play in fostering this relationship. She is the founder and executive director of New York City Wildflower Week, an organization that produces cultural and educational programming to engage urbanites with the wilds of the Big Apple. Marielle is a regular contributor to the New York Times. She is also advancing local biodiversity policy, a bill that she helped develop supporting native plants and public landscapes became law in 2013. Her initiative, Pop-Up Forest, has inspired organizations around the world, from Jakarta to Dublin, Bogota, and Lagos, to create immersive, nature-based experiences that amplify grassroots efforts for biodiversity conservation in cities. So please welcome Marielle.
Oh my God. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna do my slides, and I feel like if I stand there, my back will be to you all.
So
I'm not sure what to do.
can just advance the slide.
Can you stand on the other side?
I can do it. Yes, you just tell me when to switch.
Yeah, alright.
Yeah, you're not blocking the camera now.
I'm what?
You're not blocking the camera where you are right now.
Okay. Alright, I have my cheat sheet notes on there. Alright, whatever. I haven't talked about the report in public yet, but you've all seemed really nice. So if I make a mistake or something, I feel like I'll be in good hands. Good.
I'm
Okay.
switching, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you don't mind, that's
Not at all,
awfully
not at
nice
all.
of
You
you.
tell me
Thank
when.
you. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, so I just want to say, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Like I said, this is the first time I'm talking about the report on a one-to-one basis with people. Oh no, but actually no, I did talk about the report on the Brian Lair show, and I have a link. And I'm on the Brian Lair show a lot. He's very nice. I did a series with Brian about trees. I don't know if any of you were around for that. We talked about trees for a year. Once a month they came on and we talked about some different aspect of the tree, whatever. I could talk about it later. But I did talk about it with Brian. Brian asked me questions I was not prepared for, but then I pulled it out of I don't know. And it was great. Anyway, but I haven't done it in person, so we'll do this now, let me think. So, the Biodiversity Task Force report. So just a little bit more about me. I'm a botanist. I used to work for the Parks Department, and I was unhappy with what I saw going on in the Parks Department. Let's put it that way. So when I left, I started my own organization called New York City Wildflower Week. And so I bring people out to natural areas in New York City and talk to them about our native flora and why these plants are important. I do work in Title I schools, public schools in New York City. I've done a lot of work with kids in the classroom, getting them out of the classroom. And I've also done a lot of policy work. A bill that I worked on in 2013 was signed into law. It's the first time a local law has the word biodiversity in it. And I've worked on some other things. A law that I worked on a couple of years ago was to have a official wildflower for the city. We have an official flower, which is the daffodil, which to me is like womp womp. Because it's like, what is a daffodil? To me, daffodils are kind of like tulips. Tulips have a huge carbon footprint. And I feel like these are things people don't really think about when they're looking at gardens, and you just think about how beautiful it is. But the idea that we have these standardized landscapes that you could live in New York City and it looks the same as Miami and it looks the same as San Francisco, that's sadness, that stinks. And that's not what our landscape should look like. It's not good, from a climate perspective, and it's certainly not good from a biodiversity perspective. So that was the idea behind having an official wildflower. It was not introduced. I'm trying to think where it went. It was introduced by Councilmember Eric Botcher. I don't know if you live in his district, but he's amazing, and he's been a champion of this work, and we're really excited to work with him on this. He's the one who introduced the wildflower bill. Okay, I think I'm just going to kind of wing it. Okay, so next slide. Oh, also, can you just go back? Isn't that beautiful, the cover? This is all donated art by Alan Crawford. There's his little signature. And these are all species that are native to New York City. So, I know, right? It's really beautiful.
Is that a moth?
Yeah, okay, so I'll go, to me this is just like, everyone knows what this is, but of course course they don't. So that's a Luna moth. Luna moths are rare species in New York City. This is a white oak. Oaks are native. We have like 12 different species of oaks that are native. Some are rare, some are not so rare. This is a jelly fungus. That's another native one. This is a coral fungus. This is a leopard, Atlantic coast leopard frog, which is rare. And then this is sensitive fern, which is really common. What? Oh, yeah, they do. I could give you their information later if you. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the task force. Who is the task force? So, in thinking about plants in New York City, you know, plants are like I don't even know. No one cares about plants in New York City. If it's in a garden, then people care about it, or people care about trees, but people largely do not care about plants that grow in the wild, and I have proof. Because when I worked at the Parks Department, that was when the whole kerfuffle was around pale mail, right? Everyone in here remembers pale mail, of course. And pale mail got tons of attention. It was written about in like, you know, breathlessly in like the Times and, you know, Channel 2 News, and everybody was out there. And red-tailed hawks are super cool, but they are not rare. They're not state-listed rare. They're maybe uncommon, but they're not a rare species. So I, at the time, was working on a globally rare plant that had been found in Staten Island. And the response to that from the borough president was like, dig it up and put it on my desk and I'll water it every day. And like, you know, so for a long time I've just been thinking about like, how can we make these things, you know, how do you kind of like scale this up to a point that people understand that all these things are connected? And so really the idea is talking about it from a biodiversity level. So the task force then, and again, you know, I've been doing this work in New York City for probably like 20 years. I've seen a lot of different projects come and go. And a lot of these things are very top down. And it's typically by people who have degrees in like urban planning. And urban planners don't know ecology. They know nothing about ecology. They can't identify like a white oak from a red oak. And I can't do their job, but then they shouldn't be asked to do my job. So ecologists really need to be at the center of this work. And so that was the idea behind starting the task force. The task force is filled with people who are work at different levels. We have people from city agencies. We also have people who work for environmental justice organizations, who are on-the-ground practitioners and scientists. So having different community-driven organizations participate at an equal level and have equal footing and equal say at the table was really important to us. So community-based, and our values were to protect, restore, and value urban nature, and to create a framework for action that will support nature and biodiversity. Next slide. So, and of course, New York City is filled with over 8 million people. So people are very much at the heart of what we're talking about when we do this work. And so finding opportunities to connect people to the nature that we have and also value these wild spaces and species was really important. Next slide. So what's at stake? Most people don't understand the nature that New York City has, but there's a book whose name I will not remember in this moment that talks about, if you ask me later, I will remember. But it talks about how cities develop. And if you think about like, what's a city? A city is a place where people go to exploit natural resources, essentially, right? And so that's what New York City is. And when you read the historical records from, the Henry Hudson's crew, they talk about like the overwhelming scent of wildflowers wafting out to the boat. So a lot of that is gone, but it's not all gone. So some of these pockets are still here. So we have a lot of biodiversity that's here, it's still here. We have an extraordinary number of wetland losses, and the exact number is on my cheat sheet on the Google slides, but it's something like, we've lost like 85% of our salt marshes and 90-something% of our freshwater wetlands for a lot of different reasons. And then, so the remaining habitats that we do have left in the city are really valuable. And of course here, one of the things we talk about in the report is valuing horseshoe crabs that are millions of years old and have been migrating to the shores of New York City and spawning for millennia. So how do you value something like that? That's our goal. That's kind of what we're aiming towards. Next slide, please. So what do we have? So what is biodiversity? Let me back the whole way up. Biodiversity is really just like the living things. So if something's alive, it's biodiversity. If it's not alive, but it's outside, then it could be like nature, like a rock. A rock is not alive. But like the tree overhanging it, the microbes in the soil, the earthworms in the soil, which are not native, the birds, that's all part of biodiversity. So in New York City, we have globally rare species, one of which I have up here, rare tree. We have Juglans cinerea, which is actually in Manhattan. It's butternut. It's related to black walnut, and it grows wild in, I'm pointing this way vaguely, but it's in the Hill Park. It grows in Manhattan. I think that's the only place we have it in the city.
What's it called?
It's called Juglans cinerea, which is butternut. So the common name is butternut, yeah. But Juglans is the genus name for walnuts.
Does it let off Juglon?
Yes, they all do. That's where the name comes from. So we also have globally rare Anzelone nantucketensis, which also grows in Manhattan. It grows somewhere in Manhattan, which I won't tell where it is. But this is another globally rare plant. Globally rare plants, globally rare. When you think about globally rare things, you think about like, I don't know, where do you think of? Like the Amazon or something. We have things like that grow here. It's amazing. But nobody really cares. Politicians certainly don't. We have a moth that is endemic to New York State. It's the only place this moth has ever been documented. Maybe it's undocumented because it's not very common at all. And of course we have piping plovers. Piping plovers are notoriously shy, but yet their largest population of piping plovers in the world is in Queens, which is the borough that has the most number of spoken languages, right? So these things are amazing. And we have meadows, we have dunes, we have forests, of course. We have upland forests. Wetland forests are called swamps. So whenever people say drain the swamp, I'm like, don't drain the swamp. That's my little comeback on social media. Don't drain the swamp. And coastal habitats. There, not a lot of them are there, but we do have some of them left. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the globally rare plant that's in Manhattan. This is Manhattan. This is looking out into the East River, and that's it right there. It's the shrub. It's Nantucket Juneberry or Anzelone nantucketensis, and it's globally rare. It's so exciting. Okay, next slide.
Is that in Woodville Park?
No, it's not in Inwood Hill Park, and I'm not going to tell. I'm not going to say. I'm not telling where it is because these kinds of things are not to be
What's that
told to the
castle
public.
up there on the hill?
What?
What's that
This
castle?
is I don't know. This is just
No,
overlooking the
on
Hudson
hill,
River.
right.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know what it is. I didn't take this picture. It's the Hudson. The
But you
Hudson
say-
River.
plant.
Next
You said
slide.
you're looking at the East River?
No,
I-
not
I
the East River.
actually have-
Hudson River. Okay. So
Can I
why?
just ask a question about that plant?
Sure.
Is it globally rare and going extinct? Like, did we save the seeds and all
Yeah,
that?
no,
stuff?
I mean, when something's globally rare, that means it's going extinct. If it's globally common and nobody's then you wouldn't call it globally rare, right? So if something's rare, it's
Right.
on the down, you're losing it.
So are we protecting it in any way?
No.
Don't you say?
No, there's nothing. And in fact, it might not still even be there because the Parks Department is doing a restoration project. And yeah, that's all I'll say.
Okay,
It might not even still be there, but it was when I was there last year. Okay, why does this matter? It matters because nature is our infrastructure, and we never talk about it that way, but that's what nature really is. It protects us from floods. Nature helps cool our neighborhoods, and it supports our human health and well-being in lots of different ways. And it also matters because different communities, especially minoritized communities, communities of color, and lower income neighborhoods, often lack access to healthy ecosystems. But of course, the converse is also true, where communities of color are located very close to a natural area, and typically those are wetland areas, because those were areas that were built to house people of color, and that's where it's part of like redlining. So it wasn't quite redlining, but it was like that's like on Corona Queens, where who's the famous Louis Armstrong lived. That a lot of that neighborhood is on low-lying wetland areas. Next slide, please. And this is a restored salt marsh. This is in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And we've lost the majority of our salt marshes because almost all of our coastal areas have been converted to commercial use. Next slide, please. So one of the problems with thinking about New York City and thinking about biodiversity is the idea that New York City is a concrete jungle. And this is false. Of course, there are areas, and not looking out this window, but looking out that window, if you go to the other side of the building, yes, this is a concrete jungle, but guess what, Manhattan, not everything is Manhattan. New York City has 5 boroughs, and especially the outer boroughs have a lot of natural areas. The city expanded. So New York City actually has a lot of open space, and in fact, it has the most amount of parkland out of any city in the United States. More than like Philadelphia and Los Angeles and maybe Houston combined. But, so this mythos around the concrete jungle is a problem because you're constantly butting heads then with city officials and other people who buy into this myth. And when you go to tell somebody who thinks that everything is Times Square, that we have a globally rare plant, they don't believe you, or it's, doesn't get the attention it deserves. Next slide. So this narrative around the city is a problem. Oh, I forgot to change the picture there, sorry. How nature helps us. So nature provides services for free. But just because nature gives us these things for free doesn't mean that the things nature does are without value. In fact, the value that nature provides is almost incalculable. Imagine going around and hand pollinating every flower in your garden so that you would get tomatoes. You don't have to do that because we have bumblebees that buzz pollinate. But if we didn't have bumblebees, you would not have tomatoes. And the same is, just kind of writ large. Who likes to breathe? That's just a ridiculous question. Everybody breathes, and I don't think we could hold our breaths for more than a minute, 2 minutes? That's plants. Plants and plankton is where we get our oxygen from. New York City's water, very famously, is due to the forests in the Catskills. We paid nothing for that. That was very little to buy up land and farmland. So buying up forests and farmland in the Catskills allows us to have some of the best drinking water in the world. And in fact, that example was used by this woman who created the field of ecological economics. Her name is Gretchen Daly. And she talked in her classes about New York City's drinking water. And so it's this very famous example. Wetlands, of course, are very important because they absorb storm surges. So when we have, a really good example is Superstorm Sandy. The North Shore of Staten Island is an environmental justice neighborhood. And during Superstorm Sandy, areas of Staten Island were protected from the storm surges by the coastal dunes and wetlands. But today these coastal dunes and wetlands they're fighting development of these coastal dunes and wetlands. These wetlands are not wetlands because they are, because of politics and timing, essentially. And they are not getting the support that they need to save these wetlands, even when you talk to climate politicians who are like, what was it, the 2017 New York City Council climate bill? All of those people who signed that bill were also talked to about these people and saving the forest, and none of the city council people would sign on it. So that's what I mean about this sense that you can talk about climate and they're obviously connected, but then getting people to care is another story. But anyway, so that's why those wetlands and dunes are really important. And being out in green supports human wellness. There have been 50 years of studies around environmental psychology that talk about the fact that the color green, what it does for people's psychology, and the way that being in nature affects people on a molecular level. It's been shown to slow the spread of cancers, If you are outside and let's say a tree is being attacked by like a fungal infection, trees can talk to each other through phytohormones, and they're dispersed in different ways, but some of them are aerosols, so they're in the air. And it warns nearby trees that I'm being attacked by this thing, get ready. And so these other trees change their biochemistry of their leaves in response. So do people. If people breathe in those aerosols, it raises the T cell count in our blood. So a 15-minute exposure, breathing that in, is a 24-hour benefit. So there's tons of ways in which people benefit from nature, and it's not really talked about enough. Next slide, please. So the task force came up with 5 priorities. We had to kind of pick, we had to limit what we were doing because we had no funding. And again, biases where we applied for grants, but because this wasn't related to climate, almost every environmental grant has to be climate related. And we could tie things into climate, but whatever, we didn't get any funding for this. So we had to be choosy about what we were gonna focus on. And the task force voted, and this is what the top 5 were. So protecting wild spaces and species, that's like, regular natural areas. Talking about biodiversity justice and opportunities to advance that. Promoting ecological landscapes, investing in nature, and elevating biodiversity everywhere. So to kind of go through a little bit, biodiversity justice, we talk a lot about environmental justice, and I think a lot of that comes, when people think about that or talk about it, it's related to like air pollution, water pollution and water quality, and it's also now more recently related to climate and access to like street trees. But there are things that nature does, again, that people who live in every part of New York City should have access to. They should have access to beauty and wonder. That's a big part of something that nature provides. There's been a lot of research within the past 2 years about the importance of awe, A-W-E, and birdsong. Very recently, there's a paper that talks about hearing different species of birdsong makes people as happy as getting a raise. I think it has to be at least 5 different birdsongs. So if you hear, the same, let's say like cardinal or whatever, but then you live in an area that has different kinds of trees and attracts different kinds of birds, like all of that's really important. And I don't think we talk about the richness and wonder of nature enough. We talk about trees in really reductive terms, that they're like, street infrastructure. They're like big umbrellas, and that's not at all what trees are. Ecological landscapes, we hear a lot about, or at least I do, sustainable landscapes this and sustainable landscapes that. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. But talking about ecology means something. Ecology is the study of the living world and how it interacts with each other. So what that means is you're promoting ecological relationships. And a really good example of that is from the work of Douglas Talamy. He is very famous, and he came up, he's an entomologist, and he's promoted the idea that native plants support birds. People talk about their barberries or whatever, hoo-ha they have in their yard, that the birds eat the berries. No. When birds are nesting and they have their babies in the nest, that is the bottleneck for most birds. And what they need to feed the babies are proteins and fats, and those come from insects. So if they don't have insects, there's no bone development in the birds. Like, it's absolutely critical for them to have these resources. And where do insects come from? They come from native plants. So native plants and native insects have, evolved in New York City for thousands of years since the glaciers retreated. And plants don't want to be eaten, insects want to eat. So they do this kind of little dance, like plants create these toxins in the leaves that some insects learn to deal with and others don't. So everyone knows milkweeds and monarchs, right? But every plant and insect has this relationship. It might not be quite as specific or quite as toxic, but it's kind of writ large. So the work that Douglas Talamy has done has shown that the Parks Department, for example, plants a lot of cornus moss, which is, it's an Asian, cornus is dogwood, so it's an Asian dogwood species. It blooms in early spring. It has very tiny yellow flowers. It's kind of ugly. I don't know why they plant it, but they plant a ton of it. It's all over Central Park. It's all over the side of Central Park. So there's that tree, and then there's flowering dogwood. Who knows flowering dogwood? Yeah, so flowering dogwood is native. It grows in the wild in New York City. It's so exciting because it's such a beautiful, beautiful tree. So flowering dogwood supports 100 species of caterpillars.
Wow.
The Cornus moss, the Asian, supports zero caterpillars.
Wow.
And black-capped chickadees, thank you for wowing, I appreciate that. Black-capped chickadees and the study was done in Carolina chickadees that Douglas Talamy, one of his graduate students, Desiree Narongo, did a study on Carolina chickadees that were nesting in Baltimore. They just pick trees and build a nest, right? And they only forage within 2 city blocks of the nest. Are there enough insects to feed the babies within 2 city blocks of those nests? And the answer very often is no. She would find dead baby birds in the nest. And sunflower seeds. They don't eat sunflower seeds. The babies don't eat that. So the things that you see birds eating in your yard is not the things that the birds really need, right? So anyway, ecological landscape, super, super important. So the idea that like we need to be producing as much insects, invertebrate wildlife, that's what that's about. Investing in nature is the idea of our drinking water. So New York City has no way to value the services that nature provides for free. But we should. Why is, when the city's economic development corporation owns open space, it's just called undeveloped. And there's no value to it unless it's bulldozed and they build big box stores on it. Ask me how I know this. That is obviously, when you have an area that has glacial till soils from, 30,000 years ago, and these are native soils and it's never been built on, that is irreplaceable. And a Target and a Christmas tree store and a Home Depot, don't cut it. So we need to find ways that we are valuing on our spreadsheets the value that nature provides. That if we had to turn around and do it ourselves, what would that cost me? And elevating biodiversity everywhere is that whatever climate has, we want the same for biodiversity. Climate has an office, biodiversity should have an office. Climate has advisory boards, biodiversity should have advisory boards. What we want is not a biodiversity report, we want biodiversity in every report. Next slide, please. And so it's grouped into these, we grouped our recommendations into these different categories. And then in each one of these, we have action items that people can do. And they're at all different scales. So some of these things are obviously we want the city to be valuing ecosystem services. That's something for the mayor to do. But there's also lots of things that individual organizations and people can also do. And also, just to talk about this for a little bit, globally, let's talk about that for a minute. So I know everyone in here, I'm sure, knows the IPCC. So there is also an IPBES, which is the Biodiversity Organization. And along with the Paris Accord, there is a Paris Accord for Nature that most people don't know about, because the United States was party to the Climate Accord and was never party to the biodiversity one, even though they both came about at the Rio Convention in 1992. So politics. But so the United States, the richest, most powerful country on the planet, has never paid their dues to the United Nations COP. The President of the United States has never talked about biodiversity. These words never come up on a national level. And so we are woefully behind the world. I attended the Biodiversity COP in 2022, which was in Montreal, and there were over 15,000 people from every corner of the globe coming there to talk about biodiversity. I cried at one point. But also, it's not just places with money, it's every nook and cranny. people who live in places where they have developing economies, they're thinking really hard about the ways to make biodiversity work and protect what they have. Why are we not doing the same? It's like, I don't even have a word for it because I'm so dumbfounded by it. Like it's, amazing. And when we tell people that we've worked with, we were very lucky with this report to have an amazing team of reviewers who are globally renowned scientists and leaders, and one of them in the forward of the report was like, when they told me New York City doesn't have any biodiversity legislation, I couldn't believe it. No one can believe it. It's because it's unbelievable. That I also still have to define what biodiversity is to people in the mayor's office. Next slide. So what should New York City be doing? New York City should be fully funding the Parks Department and allowing for the majority of the Parks Department money goes to recreational. It's always people facing. We need to do a lot more for the nature in the city, and parks needs to coordinate with state and federal parks as well. It's not just city parks, it's state and federal. We need to create a plan for every agency. Every agency needs to be thinking about biodiversity and how it fits into their agenda. Mandate reviews before every development project. There should be a mandated review, which right now there's a little bit of a review, but it doesn't in fact stop any kind of development. They'll talk about, oh, it's going to have this impact, and then they just go ahead and do it. And we need to align with global goals. The world is miles and miles ahead of us, and we need to catch up. Next slide. What it'll take, it's going to take a shift in priorities and culture. New York City has nothing for biodiversity right now, like very little. So we need everybody's, energy and efforts to getting this over the finish line. We need 2% for parks. Forget 1%. 1% is like just so the patient doesn't die. But we need the patient to be really thriving. 2%, and we need a culture shift. Next slide, please. So what you can do, this is a scarlet tanager talking about those insects. They're very beautiful birds, and they nest in interior forest habitat. They don't like forest edge, so you need to have deep, dark woods to have scarlet tanagers. So what you can do, you can share the report. You can, join the Zoom. I mean, we're already talking, so you don't need to join the Zoom, but you can if you want to. I'm going to be doing Zooms where we're going to be pulling people in to just talk more about what the report is. Please sign on as a person who supports this effort. We're looking to get a lot of people signed on so we can get the next mayor to take this issue seriously. And if you're feeling totally overwhelmed by all of those things, there have been research that shows that if you have even one native plant on your balcony or rooftop, that brings in native insects. So even just having a little native wildflower helps. Every little bit helps. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about this. This is the QR code that gets you to the report landing page where we talk about, there's a link to the Broiler episode and just why the report is important, and then a link to the report. So thank you so much. I had no idea how long it was, and I apologize. Okay, thanks. Yes.
Couple things.
Yes.
I voted for the wildflower. Was that?
You did?
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Wait,
And that was so exciting. It was like, was this the first? How many years has that been going?
Yeah. So that was from last year. No, the year before. And yeah. So last year then was when City Council Member Botcher introduced the bill for review at the committee level on the wildflower. Yeah, so that was last year maybe.
What was the bill's number or name?
Which
The
one?
bill.
The wildflower bill? Oh, I don't know. I have to look it up.
Okay, what was the year then?
It was last year, 2024. Yeah, and it was Councilmember Eric Botcher. Yeah.
Anyway, that was a great idea to get
Thank
people
you.
engaged and,
Thank you.
yeah.
That was the idea. The idea is like to, right, so I'm really good at coming up with little things like that to get people excited. And the idea was like to do the thing with the wildflower and then be like, I really do, that's great that we have an official wildflower, but what I really want is biodiversity policy from soup to nuts. Anyway, but yeah, thank you.
And the other question was, don't they have, I know that they have like a global biodiversity conference.
Yes, that's the COP that I was talking about before, that I went to Montreal.
Yeah.
So that's a UN Convention on Biological Diversity and Ecosystem Services.
And is that annual?
No, it's the same as the climate COP, so that's what,
Oh.
every 2 years or
Okay,
something?
uh-huh.
I don't know, the climate COP, is it every other year? How often is it? It isn't
The
every
COP?
year? No, ours is not every year. It's not every year.
That, the biodiversity one was a special COP, so I don't know if it's like,
No, they have it, the biodiversity one is every like 2 years. There was one, so the one that I went to was supposed to be in China, but then it got pushed back because of COVID, and then it ended up being in Montreal, obviously, and that was December 2022. And then September 2024 was the most recent one, and that was in Colombia, the country.
And does that have like, does that impact anything, is there anything mandatory that comes out of that that make the US comply?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there are a lot of things that if we were a signator of that, party to that COP, we would be required is a strong word, but we would be strongly encouraged to do a number of things. But I mean, so the one exciting thing was that President Biden actually talked a lot about biodiversity, and he might be the first president who ever said the word biodiversity. And that was largely due to this woman, Monica Medina. And Monica Medina, was like she was the special envoy for biodiversity, essentially. And she went to Montreal for that UN convention to talk about what the so the US was kind of like, not an official party, but because it's the US, it was like, I don't know, Bruce Springsteen with groupies. Like everyone was following her around and trying to talk to her. And we're very lucky that Monica is she's an advisor to the task force, and so we're working with her to help kind of push this agenda forward. We're very lucky to have her.
so, I'm gonna ask Lena's question in another way. I
Oh,
think
sure.
that's what you're getting
Oh.
at. So you know how, Paris Agreement,
Yes.
for all signatories, it's basically still volunteer. That's
Right.
required. With the biodiversity, is it still voluntary or are there mandates?
Yeah, no, I think I don't think there are, everything with the UN is kind of voluntary. None of it's you can't make the United States do something it doesn't want to do, right? So that's why so much of this is about like culture change and culture shift, and it's education, but it's also culture, in the sense that like New York City is only, hardscapes and humans. No, we have rare plants, and if you don't talk about these things, like, New York City is also along the Atlantic Flyway. We have migratory birds, we have migratory insects like monarch butterflies, we have a number of different migratory butterflies, we have migratory dragonflies, we have migratory bats, we don't talk about any of these things, really. We hear a lot, maybe too much about birds, but not about all these other creatures we share our city with. And, they have different needs, and they're all really important to, call this city home. One of the things related to the UN COP is that I would love to see New York sign on as a subnational government. You can do that. And in fact, cities globally have done that in the past. Montreal is huge, they've done a ton of work. Paris has done a ton of work. Mexico City, Singapore, every global city has a huge, every global city is on maybe their second or third iteration of their biodiversity plan. We have nothing. The local law that I worked on, I think there might be, the word biodiversity might be in something about green roofs. I don't know, and then that's it, really. All the Plan NYC iterations, no biodiversity in those. Not for lack of trying. Yeah.
Yeah,
mean, I think there was a law passed by the New York City Council a couple of years ago about increasing the tree canopy from 23 to 30%.
Yeah, that was an Eric Botcher, yeah.
Yeah, so was biodiversity part of that
No,
now?
so increasing tree canopy is really important. But increasing tree canopy and not thinking about biodiversity is a lost opportunity. When, the Million Trees program was first launched, I worked with Parks, I was still at Parks. And my division, I was the city botanist, so I was responsible for like conservation management and restoration of all the wild flora in the city. And we were not told about this until it was like a press release in the news. So we had no like heads up. New York City also has a municipal nursery. It's a municipal native plant nursery. It's it's the first native plant nursery, municipal native plant nursery in the country. It's in Staten Island. Might not be the only one. I know, and nobody knows about it. And I write that in the report. Why does no one know about this? We should be celebrating it. Why don't we celebrate these things that we have? Why don't we celebrate where our water comes from? It's kind of amazing. But we don't. Shame on us, and it's nothing. It's the lowest lift, So what they do there is really important. They go to different natural areas in New York City, in Long Island, in New Jersey, and Westchester County, collecting local ecotypes of native plant species, and planting them, growing them out in the nursery, and then using them for restoration projects. They also give them out to community gardens. So if you work in a community garden or some kind of public-facing garden, you can get plants from them too. So that's really important work that they're doing. And of course, it's like they're scraping by. There's hardly any funding for what they're doing.
Why don't they do like a plant sale? I mean, I'm sure there are interested people who would want.
Right, but it's the Parks Department. Like they can't do that. They can't just set up a plant sale. What?
Botanical Gardens in the Bronx is a
Right, but the
plant sale.
Botanical Garden is not the same as like a city agency. They run completely differently. So city parks, they shouldn't need a plant sale. They should be funded. They should be fully funded and not have to ask for funds from a plant sale, right? They should be able to give these plants away to the people who need them. So it's kind of like our public schools should not be selling cupcakes. They should be fully funded. Yeah, it's the same. And if you think about parks in the same way, parks is a public good. These are public properties, nature, in the same way that I don't know if any of you watched Ken Burns' movie on national parks. People talk about national parks and they're crying, People should be crying about our natural areas in New York City. They're amazing. We have really cool stuff in New York, but it's like the city does not do a good job of marketing the nature that we have. You can go to other places in the country and they do a much better job. And again, culture, I think that's a big part of it. And people, when I worked for Parks, I drove around in the truck, I had the thing, and when I would stop and do something, people would come up to me and say, why don't they do blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, I know, same, So people are hungry for it. I just think that there's just a huge missed opportunity. Sorry.
There is a public input process going on for this tree canopy increase. I actually went to a meeting with the park.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, there is a public, the coalition behind the planning for this increase in the tree canopy has been going to different communities to ask for their input.
Right.
Because I actually attended one of these at Inglewood Park, and I didn't really know anything to contribute. I do now. I'm just seeing this, but
Yeah.
I can't believe that you can't have some input.
Yeah, but I know those people, right? I've been doing this work for a really long time. There are not a lot of plant people in New York City. So I know a lot of those people, and some of it is just kind of they'll do it if they have to, and it's not that group necessarily, but like I said earlier, I spoke to people in the mayor's office and in Glenn Savich's office on camera, and I had this call with people who are in positions to make decisions that involve 8.5 million New Yorkers' lives, right? However many of us there are. And when we talked about biodiversity, they didn't know what it meant. And then we explained what it meant. This is Okay, this is an office that should have known what it meant. And then they were like, they said, the intern was the one who spoke the most, and she said, doesn't like the Parks Department plant goldenrod and stuff. So that's kind of what you're dealing with, and I mean, I know what you're saying, but there's so much more. It's like, you know, you see what, you don't see the man behind the curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz. There's all this other stuff going on that you don't see. Yes, that process is going on, and
Because I know the Nature Conservancy is very active in this, but I mean, they don't know much about this either.
I'm not gonna talk about it
Okay.
on tape. I have lots of thoughts about it, but I'm not, yes, they all do things, but whether they're doing something that's useful is to be
Specific
determined.
parks have Friends of the Park. I remember.
Yes.
I was organizing a hike through Van Cortlandt Park, and there was a Friends of Van Cortlandt Park.
Yes, there is a friend, well, they're not friends of anymore, now it's called the Van Cortlandt, it's the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance.
Okay, this was like 15 years ago.
Yeah, so there's a Friends of group, and then there was like a Van Cortlandt Conservancy, and now they've
But might
merged.
those people listen to you?
Those people have their own sort of random agendas. They are run through, they all kind of do what they want to do, and they go to different, yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, but it's also like there's no,
Read between the lines.
yeah, there's a, you know, like, yes, no, I know all of these groups exist, and they are not mandated to listen to me, or, you know, Parks has no rules for kind of how, has very loose rules for how they work. One of the things that we talk about in the report is that they should do a better job of coordinating what the goals are for the park where they work. Because a lot of friends of groups mean well, and, you know, yeah, I could tell you stories.
Sean's gonna have the last question.
Okay, sure.
We need to clear the room out, because we're the only group in the building tonight.
Okay.
So we need to clear the room out, but Sean has his hand up.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask, you know, we've kind of been circling this, but what is different about New York City versus other cities that have been more motivated to implement biodiversity initiatives? Like what is the underlying thing that when you speak to groups here, you hit a wall versus like those other cities have clearly made some?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't totally know. I mean, I think some of it is cultural, is this kind of story that New York City tells about itself. I think part of it in the United States for sure is water related. Water, we treat water as a waste product. And in as you know, in the Western US, water is always a concern. So talking about xeriscaping has driven a lot of conversations around native plants. And also living in a place like California where you have like, you know, I don't know, they must have like 20 or 30 endemic plant species, and so the state of California does. Just plants alone, right? So California has lots of different, species that are native just to California. So, but I think a lot of it is culture. And some of it I think is just around the ways that New York City sees itself, that it's the center of commerce, and maybe we think we're like post-nature, I don't know. But the sense that like, you know, I think in a lot of ways, like we think about the idea of how, I mean this is really sad, but the idea of like, you take for granted living in a stable democracy, and then you realize, wow, it's really hard to get things done when you live in an unstable democracy. It's the same with nature. You take all that stuff for granted until, oh wow, now it's flooding and we got like 6 inches of rain. Of course the 6 inches of rain is related to climate, but we wouldn't have as bad an issue if we kept open space everywhere. So even like City planning didn't, all right, I should not say this on tape. I think that, okay, yeah, I think that,
Yeah.
you know, parts of the idea that you can allow, one of the things that City of Yes says is that it permits the building of livable structures in your yard. And the idea that now we need all the green that we can for all the rain that is falling everywhere. And like 2 years ago, parts of Brooklyn were flooded that on the floodmap.net NYC, whatever that map is, doesn't predict that it's ever gonna be flooded, ever, like 50, 100 years from now. Looking at like climate, right? So this was in September 2023 when the current mayor told everyone to send their kids to school, and then they were like, oh, shelter in place. No. Yeah, the flooding was really bad, and flooding was bad just the other day too. That was mostly in New Jersey, right? But so think about this idea that like, you know, the Elizabeth Street Garden, and it's about housing and like, I don't know, singing songs with a tambourine in the park. That's how people talk about it. Instead it's like, no, this is like infrastructure. This is ecological infrastructure that we need to have in the city. We need places where water can drain and hold, and so we don't flood the streets, and right? So this is how we need to talk about these things.
I'm sorry, just one last question.
Sure.
I just really wanted you to talk for a minute about the
Sure.
pop-up forest.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Well, pop-up forest, I did, I'm not really working on that anymore. That was something that kind of petered out with COVID.
But a lot of other cities I've read
Yes.
have taken that on.
Yes, and right, yes. And this was, from a number of years ago. Let me think. So the idea behind the pop-up forest was I wanted to do one in Times Square. Everything for me is the same. How do you get people to care about biodiversity? How do you get people to care about the plants I love? So it was like, okay, where's the place that no one thinks there's any nature? Times Square. So if you can have a forest pop up in Times Square, now you're really like driving some kind of messaging home. So that was where the idea came from. And no one cares about forests that have been here for thousands of years, but what if you had one that like popped up and then disappeared? You know, pop-up stores, people talk about pop-up like Target stores. Target is the jean store.
So cool.
But if it's a pop-up, then it's cool. So I was like, okay, I see you. So that's where the idea came from. And then I was working with other cities. We were going to try to do something for the COP, which was going to be when it was moved to, oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, sorry. So we were trying to do something for the Biodiversity COP collectively, and then there was COVID, and a lot of the pieces kind of fell apart. But some cities did go on to do it on their own. But the idea was that we were gonna do this kind of collective thing all at the same time. And then the pieces of the pop-up forest. So I ended up doing something where I rode this e-bike from Brooklyn over the Brooklyn Bridge into Times Square, and I stopped and people took selfies with it. I was on the Brian Lear show, people came out and talked as we rode along. And then the plants that were in there, we used to build a native plant garden for Title I kids to use as an outdoor classroom. So the idea that you're doing this thing, but then you're returning it, and there's like a long-term benefit, and the community is really benefiting. It's not just this hokey. I mean, it's hokey, right, but that's for the press, and then the rest of it is like benefiting, local neighborhoods and building out educational curriculum for that,
It's a great idea, it got a lot of attention.
It did,
Yeah.
It did.
I'm gonna have to end it here.
Sure,
I'm so
sure.
sorry,
No,
but
that's
I think
okay.
there's an opportunity for collaboration with 350, right? On a project of some sort.
Yeah.
I really do.
That would be, I would love that, I would love to keep talking. I'm so grateful for all of your attention and your interest. Thank you so much
It's
for
so
having me.
interesting and so important.
Thank you.
So much, really.
Thank you.